on the Daily Drive. Property Fast Track with Charles Tarbey. Thanks to Century 21. Smarter, bolder, faster. Go to century21.com.au.
Lots ahead tonight. We've got Talking Technology with Trevor Long in an hour's time. And later, if you're in the business for being employed, Matthew Takaki has loads of jobs. As we heard earlier, thousands of jobs in Second Career. A little later tonight with Matt Takaki. But yeah, Property Fast Track. Charles Tarbey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nick. Kaylee.
Hello, Charles.
Haven't seen you for a little while, back and forward.
No, been off for a couple of weeks. Now, what's been happening? Clearance rates, how have they been over the weekend?
They're pretty good, actually. When I say good, I still like clearance rates on average in the 60s. I think that's mid-60s. That's a good, healthy market. When it gets into the 50s, the agent's working very hard now. And that's wonderful because I said the agents, not people who joined the industry in the last 5 years. The agents are working very hard now, and that's how they like it. So, but the best performer was Melbourne again. But it's as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, it's certainly showing signs of wear and tear as well.
Yeah, we'll get into the nitty gritty of with Tom Panos a bit later in the show. But just quickly, the national clearance rates were 66.9 this time last year, 73%.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've been seeing that change right across the entire country, and again, we saw Hobart jump up last week over Melbourne, and I think that was the end of it. You know, we were talking about how that flow-on effect goes, and Melbourne, and why is Hobart going so well? So much money in Melbourne flowing out now, and people are looking, and so now all of a sudden that Melbourne market's pulled back at 69% clearance rate, and that they had 1,727 auctions, so but pretty solid.
All the Melbourne money's floating across Bass Strait and landing on the shores of Tasmania.
Anything happen with Perth? Is it moving yet at all?
I like Perth. The three capital cities that have performed better than this time last year. Last week was Adelaide, Brisbane and Perth. And this week, those same three capital cities performed better than this time last year. Okay. So they're interesting marketplaces because I looked at the stock levels in Perth, and the stock levels in Perth are actually negative, over 12% negative, and in Darwin over 33% negative over this time last year, whereas Sydney was 20% up and Melbourne was 2.7% up. So you can see what's happening. The stock's coming off the market in Perth, which it's also is indicating a big change there for me is watching the vacancy rates, and they hit 6.17% last week. Now, they were over the 10s for quite some time. Yep. That's the lowest I've seen it so far this year.
Okay.
So there are definitely some changes going on in Perth.
Some upward signs there for Perth. Okay.
Yes.
13 12 83. Charles Tarbey's here tonight for the next half hour or so. If you have any questions for him, this guy knows his stuff. He's been in the game for about 4 decades, we reckon. 4 decades in a day. A bit longer.
He got in the industry when he was 10.
But I don't look... Come on, Kayley.
You don't look a day over 41.
I don't. No, I don't.
13 12 83 is the number if you have a question for Charles. Now, what about this one, Charles? What's a question for you? You don't have just 5 years' experience in the game, as we know, so you've seen a lot of scenarios. What is the strangest kind of exchange of value that somebody's offered you for a property? Is it livestock? Is it a car?
Is it 3 wives?
I haven't seen livestock. 3 wives. Let me think about that for a second. Well, you look like my third wife, Kayley.
Oh, do I?
Yes.
You're still married to her, or?
I've only been married twice.
Oh.
Anyway,
That's hilarious.
I have seen situations where people have traded other property.
Okay.
So you see somebody might want to live in the country and they've got something in the city. I've seen that happen quite a lot.
You sometimes see people throw a car into the deal or something silly like that.
I think I've told you a long time ago, first house I ever sold actually was a 3-bedroom home in Emu Place, one street away from the river. It was the first one when I was 18 years of age, and it was a fully furnished home, and it came with a Hillman Hunter car because the people were going back to the UK. So they threw the car in and everything.
Fantastic.
All right.
Well, a Melbourne man who's selling a house at the Basin is willing to accept the online currency Bitcoin as part payment for the property. He believes marketing the property as Bitcoin friendly could be the deciding factor in someone's ability to purchase a house. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it might be, and I wonder the Basin. Okay, so are we talking the Basin, or because
well, you tell us.
Well, I'm wondering whether it's one of those areas where you might want to trade your house for something else. if that makes sense. Because some areas there hasn't been much capital growth as you get further out into really regional areas, not regional cities, but even areas outside of a regional capital cities. And the market doesn't move as quickly there. And a lot of people look for creative ways. Bitcoin, that's a very interesting way to trade. I'm not sure if I own Bitcoin, I might trade for a house in the basin. I'd have to have a closer look.
I mean, it's another one of those scenarios that pops up frequently in life now because we are living in this disrupted age.
Yes.
So to this gentleman, his Bitcoin is a legitimate currency. Now, at the moment, the banks don't view Bitcoin as an asset. And he says if it came down to 2 or 3 folks and both had their maximum borrowing capacity at a certain amount and one has Bitcoin, he reckons that fact could get them across the line because banks don't view Bitcoin as an asset, vendor Rob said.
Yes, I'm not sure about that, but look, the basin isn't a bad location. I've just looking through it now, and it's in a reasonably good area outside of some great suburbs of Melbourne. But still, I'm not sure with Bitcoin. I wouldn't be taking that chance if I own residential property. I wouldn't be taking the chance on Bitcoin. It's had an interesting time.
You want to see the real readies,
and look, and the banks are, like you said, they're not going to lend you against Bitcoin at this point. Not that I'm aware of, anyway. Not that I'm aware of. There may be more creative ways of selling property. There's an organisation coming out of the ground right now where you can put your property up and it goes into a trust. And let's just say your property's worth $1 million and you want to realise $300,000 instead of borrowing against it. You put your property into a trust and people can buy. Each lot is $1,000. So people can buy, there's 1,000 lots available on your property. And you become a tenant in your property and you pay market rent because you're now not the 100% owner. But people can buy in and out and then they trade that. So they trade that 1,000. So if somebody wants to buy into an investment that's in a certain location, they still can with just $1,000. That's coming out of the ground now. That's another creative way.
But when can you actually get hold of the property if you only own $1,000 worth of it? Or you can't.
Yeah, well, you can't.
You might just realise an increase in the value.
That's right. Somebody else might see, well, I don't have much money. I've got $10,000 to invest. They might buy your shares off you at an increased price, and that's where you get your capital gain.
Wow.
What's it called?
It's called blockchain, but I really cannot blockchain. Sorry.
Yeah.
I almost let it out then. It's called block something.
Block something. Do you
block
like
something.
it?
I like it. I like it because it gives people an opportunity to stay in their property but realise some cash.
Yeah.
At the same time, it allows people to buy into property that normally couldn't do a thing, and just with a few $1,000s. It is odd, and where the money is made is more in the trade. It's like you're trading. It's like a stock exchange. So you're trading. So there's money made by traders when people are buying and selling shares in a property.
But it's probably, I don't know whether it's a better or worse option or a similar option to what you do when you do that reverse mortgage thing.
This particular one, you've sold the property, and if you wanted to down the track, you can sell all the way down to nothing.
Wow.
You just sell your shares, put your shares up, people might buy them. So that's an interesting way. I've been looking at it very closely with the guys that have developed it.
Yeah.
They've been working incredibly hard to cover all the different angles of legislation that might be associated with transactions.
Who would pay the rates in that situation?
Well, it's a trust. See,
so the trust pays.
The trust pays because the trust collects rent.
All right.
And so it and also pays dividends. So if your rent, of course, there's no mortgage, so your rent is going to exceed most of the cost, so you're going to get a dividend as well.
Wow.
It's really quite clever. Really
Very
quite clever.
interesting, yeah.
Charles Tarbey on 13-12-83 tonight.
Now, we were talking earlier about streets with silly names. Would you be happy to live on a street with a silly name? You could get the home of your dreams apparently cheaper if you were prepared to do that. New research has been conducted by high school girls at the Sacred Heart College in Geelong, showing houses on 27 silly name streets in Victoria are cheaper than those on nearby roads. In fact, houses on streets like Butt Street and Willys Avenue
Butt Street. Oh, that's one T though, isn't it?
are about 20% cheaper than other nearby properties. Adam Cole's the head of science at Sacred Heart College in Geelong. He guided the research and he's joined us to talk about why properties are cheaper on these streets. Hi, Adam. How are you?
Good evening. I'm well, thanks.
So, interesting project. I'm assuming maybe it was a rainy day at Sacred Heart College in Geelong and the girls got clever and creative and came up with this. How did you come up with this fantastic bit of research?
Well, I actually came up with it when I used to live in Sydney, and I was standing at Summerhill Station, and just across the road from there is Bogan Street. And I always wondered, I wonder if the properties are cheaper in that street compared to the next street. And about a year or so later, I found myself in Geelong at Sacred Heart, and the opportunity came up to give that project a go. So the girls were enthusiastic about it and did a great job.
Yeah, Adam, Charles speaking. There are a number of interesting streets that I've seen named that in other languages have a very unusual meaning as well. So there are people in certain cultures that won't buy a house in a certain street because to the average Australian it doesn't mean anything, but to a person from, say, Greece or China, it has an incredibly different meaning. So I've seen that before.
Yeah, good point. Did you come across that stuff too?
Well, this was the first of our projects. This was the most obvious and the most fun one to do, so we thought we'd start with this one. But yes, there are so many other different projects we would like to do in the future. We'd also like to give other schools the opportunity to have a go as well.
Well, that project on finding streets that mean something in a different language might be a very good start.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Adam, give us a few examples of some of the silly streets you stumbled across.
Well, there was a local one near Geelong called Bogan Street. We've got Butts Road, Belcher Way.
Belcher Way. Belcher Way, yeah.
Busty Road and Fanny Street. In total, we had 27 different streets in Victoria. I think we almost exhausted them, actually. We kept searching beyond that, and we found it difficult to come up with any more.
What was that one with that chap that's got the wicked laugh from the UK, the Chaser?
Yeah.
And that name that came up on that you see it on Facebook all of the time. I'm not sure I can even say it on air, but it's a real person's name.
If you're not sure, then don't.
Well, it's a real person's name.
Right.
So it must be very, very hard to say to somebody, I live in Fanny Street. In the UK, of course, Fanny is your backside.
Well, that's it.
And I remember some American workers, colleagues came out here to Australia and were chatting away, and they said, we're working our fanny off, and everybody in the room just lost it. And the guy said, okay, what'd they say? So
it's like they don't have bum bags, they have fanny packs.
That's right, fanny packs.
That's it.
Adam, tell us about the school's Bradbury Club. What's that?
Yes, so at Sacred Heart College, we found that it was very hard in education to find projects where students could really get their teeth stuck into it, do a long-term project. You know, there's only so much you can achieve in an afternoon or a week. So we decided to start this Bradbury Club to really achieve outcomes. And in order to do that, we needed the longer-term ambitious projects. And we've tried to make the projects as engaging as possible because I think when everyone's engaged, then that's when the best learning can occur. So this was one of the projects we have been doing, and it's been relatively quick, this one. It's only taken about 4 or 5 months to do it. But we teamed up, when we do projects like this, we team up with mentors to make sure that we're doing this correctly. So we had some wonderful staff from Barry Plant Real Estate in the Docklands help us out. Also, staff from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. There's an office here in Geelong, just to help us create this project and design it properly and then carry it out properly so then the results at the end are reliable.
So the Bradbury Club, is it named after Stephen Bradbury?
It is, because when we came up with the club, we thought the worst thing we could do is call it a science club or a maths club or something like that. So we had to come up with a different name, and we thought that Stephen Bradbury really typified our approach. You know, if you work hard and
You're a
put
stayer.
yourself in the right place, stay up and so, put yourself in the right place at the right time, you can achieve great success.
And Stephen Bradbury doesn't get the credit he deserves because it looks like everybody fell over and he won a race. I mean, that's what happened. But the guy has been involved in that sport and in the Olympics and been around for a very, very long time. But that's not the story you see. Adam, I looked at online and I just saw another street called Wiener Cutoff. And that's in the US. There's Man Love Street here as well.
Wow.
Which I found very interesting. So
you could throw the net right out globally, Adam.
You really could.
Now, did you ascertain then through your research of silly named streets that people will pay more for a house on a street with a decent name? Will they avoid the dumb names?
Well, no, it's more that there was a proportion. So in addition to the quantitative research, we also did the qualitative research of over 300 adults to get their opinions. And what we found was that actually around half of the people would be happy to live in these streets, but there's about 35% that wouldn't be happy. And what we think is happening is it's just reducing the competition for properties in these streets, which is then driving the properties down. But it's interesting too, we found that this effect happens in rural areas but not in Melbourne. And a possible explanation for that is that you've just got a greater amount of choice in Melbourne compared to the rural centres.
So the idea of buying the worst house in the best street's kind of reversed here, isn't it?
Yes.
It is odd. There are some odd names. I'm just looking at another one. You might be interested in this one, Adam, in Mount Waverley in Victoria, Sesame Street. There you go.
Yeah.
That's a classic. Adam Cole, thank you for your time. All the very best. He's the head of science at Sacred Heart College in Geelong. There was a great album by a band called Absent Friends, and it was titled Here's Looking Up Your Address.
That's right.
That was quite cute.
I remember that. Very good.
Property Fast Track it is. Charles Tarbey's here tonight, 13 12 83. Now, here's something which is going to get a few people's attention. I can't afford this one, Charles, but Keith Urban has reportedly bought Nicole Kidman, that is, a $50 million house. And it's a bit run down. It's basically a fixer-upper.
Wow, 50 million fixer-upper. I can see that here. It says very old and tired and needs a lot of work.
Yes.
50 million.
Once belonged to Michael Jackson, and I mean, it's a great address. It's 6 stories on the Upper East Side townhouse. So the theory is that Keith wants to help wife Nicole Kidman get a bust into Broadway. I mean, she could walk to Broadway from that apartment.
I have mentioned to you before, I think people who live in really, really big houses mustn't like their families because there's plenty of places to get away. With 6 floors, you'd never find anybody there, would you?
It's pretty incredible. It's built in 1898, skinny as all get out. It's not even 8 metres wide, but it's set over, all these stories, 6 of them, 16 rooms, 7 bedrooms. It's internally 1,200 square metres. It's got 10 wood-burning fireplaces, oak staircases, outdoor space, garden-level patio, private roof deck with a kitchen on the 6th floor. Look, there's plenty of room for Airbnb there, surely.
Yeah, I think so. But I think the motivation's lovely, though, so that you don't have to catch the bus and walk to work. I think that's fantastic motivation. Yeah.
I don't think Nicole will be doing either.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be not a lot of money for Manhattan, would it?
Well, Manhattan's obviously very expensive, full stop. You can't
What's the top end of Manhattan?
I've seen some properties there over 100 million in parts of that area. So this is, I guess for them, they've got some lovely properties. I know one they've got over here in North Sydney that's half a penthouse. My mate has the other half on the top floor, and so they've got some beautiful properties everywhere. Look, if you've got the money to spend, and these guys, I guess they give a lot as well. They give a lot to charities, do a lot of charity work. They've got to spend the money somehow.
Exactly.
Why not on real estate?
13 12 83, talking real estate tonight, Property Fast Track with Charles Tarbey. There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world. Combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated, your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. It's no surprise Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent? Contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au.
Now time to chat auctions once more with Tom Panos. Hello, Tom.
Good evening. How are you all?
Oh, good, thank you. That's a dodgy phone line we've got there. Well,
hello, we'll just keep talking amongst it.
there you go. What were you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Where are you,
sorry,
Tom?
Ben.
Whereabouts are you?
I am in Hobart.
That explains it.
We were talking about Hobart earlier on, so the marketplace there being still strong.
Now, Tom, let's start with Sydney. Reports of a provisional clearance rate in the mid-60s, but we had that last week as well, and it was revised down into the low 50s. What's going on here?
Okay, so look, let's spend a bit of time talking about this because I think what's becoming really clear is that what we're told on one specific day is changing, and the reason why it's changing is the term which is called collectibles, and that is how many auction results are actually collectible by that day. And what we're finding is that real estate agents are really busy trying to put deals together on a Saturday afternoon that they haven't put together during the actual auction. So a lot of that information is actually not put together till maybe Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday. So we are going to see the tendency of the auction clearance rate actually coming down, maybe, 5% or whatever it is each week for that reason. And that is that there is more properties that are actually not being sold at the auction.
And do you think the lead into Christmas is affecting any of this too, Tom?
Yeah, I think what's actually happening now is that there's a heap of people that their agents are giving them feedback that they're not going to get the sort of money that they were hoping to get. So some of these owners have said, okay, what we might do is actually just, take that property off the auction marketplace, and we're just going to sort of, if you've got any buyers that are still interested, bring them through. So that's also affecting it because they're called as withdrawn properties from sale, and there's some of those, and 100%, I think it has got a lot to do with the fact that in the next coming weeks, there are more people that are going to be visiting Westfield shopping centres and visiting real estate auctions.
Yeah, and that's not a good thing, is it? So I reckon if you withdraw a property, in your experience, is that then viewed as sullied goods and people are a bit shy about it? And if it does come back on the market later, are reluctant to offer a decent dollar but indeed go for a bit of a fire sale approach and go low?
Okay, so it's an interesting question because you can turn around and say what's actually worse in terms of the perception. Is it worse to have a property that's withdrawn from sale, or is it actually worse to actually have the auction and no one bid and everyone just standing there? So there's not a definitive answer there. I think sometimes real estate agents and vendors like to take it off the market away from the auction because that way that they've got control of the narrative and control of the story on what's happening. And I just think that there are, like I did one on, look, there's a number of properties that I'm doing at auction at the moment where the owners and the agents are debating whether to go to auction, keep their fingers crossed just in case someone shows up that they're not expecting, or whether to actually take it off the market. And I had one in East Hills in Burbank Avenue on Saturday, which was going to be taken off the market. A buyer did show up, but he didn't bid. So,
Tom, that's why you and I know that a lot of agents, particularly in the marketplace we're coming into and of just recent times, will actually sell the property before auction if they've got one buyer, and they'll negotiate and they'll get that out of the way so it doesn't leave a bad image of an unsuccessful auction on the property.
Well, Charles, you've been training real estate agents from day one that the job is, look, what we've had the last 2 years is a bit of a boom market. Now, it's not a bad market. It's actually a normal market. It's called a market where real estate agents have to do a job, and that is generally to get the vendors to accept the reality of the marketplace and generally to get the buyer up. Now, if you've only got one buyer, as you're saying, Charles, that's what you're running around and doing 2 days before the auction. You're putting a deal together, and that's what the good ones are doing, Charles.
I said earlier on, Tom, that the real estate agents are working hard, and what I meant by that is not the people who started in the industry in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm talking about the real estate agents.
I know you've said that twice tonight. Now, what do you mean by that, Charles?
Well, a lot of people that came into the industry in the last few years saw all the gloss and glamour on Facebook, social media, and thought that, this is really easy, I'll get into that. And it was simpler to some degree if they managed to get a seller who said, I'll give you my property for sale. It was just a matter of putting up a sign and the auctioneer would come out and sell it. So now it's time for the real practitioners to step forward, and I think that's what Tom's referring to.
Those who can read people well and have good negotiation skills. Let's have a look at Melbourne. What happened there over the weekend?
Okay, so Melbourne's also, look, you're going to see, Melbourne's still healthy compared to Sydney, but I can tell you that the Melbourne clearance rate is changing as well. Real estate agents are telling me that there's less buyers coming through. Well, the final figure there, I think you guys had there is around the 70%, wasn't it?
Yeah,
69%, Tom. 1,727 properties went to auction.
Good sample size there. But I was talking to agents in Geelong today. I was talking to agents in the inner part of Melbourne, and they're saying to me that the number of people coming to open for inspections have dropped by about 30%. The sequence of price reductions normally is less people come to an open house, subsequently less people come to the auction, subsequently less bidding at an auction, and then the next step is vendors readjusting their prices. And that process can take about 3 to 4 months. So I think that, Melbourne at the moment is not where Sydney was, but it's heading in a direction where we're seeing normal real estate market in Melbourne as well.
Tom, the prestige market in Sydney and Melbourne bucked the trend, though, didn't it? Went pretty well.
Yeah, so prestige properties are interesting because I think, and are you talking about a specific property that sold really well?
No, just in general in Sydney and Melbourne, that upper end of the market.
Yeah, so properties that sell in that segment of the market are many times what I call out-of-line sales. You've got a buyer that's got, I know that there was a transaction of around 13 million that took place on the weekend. But these are situations, they do not typify the average punter out in the street. This is a situation where a family is either relocating or they've got a specific reason, and then you see this transaction that sells for, $10, $15 million. But I've got to say that that higher end of the market compared to what I call the median end of the market in each suburb seems to be faring a lot better.
The stock, equity markets are still very good, Tom. So a lot of people in that top end, they're not taking much view or greater view of the interest rates or the changes. If they can afford a better property, they're buying. Their bonuses are coming through. All sorts of things that are making those markets look different than most.
What's a bonus?
Yeah, well, look, a bonus is something that might not be there this time next year.
I said to one of
the many years actually.
I said to one of the brokers who got a bonus. I said, "You know what they call you brokers?" He said, "Why?" I said, "Because that's how you feel after I've been in front of you."
Hey, Tom Panos is with us, and mate, just finally, let's have a look at Brisbane, how it performed. You got about 152 homes auctioned over the weekend, giving us a clearance rate of 57.6 or thereabouts. Is that a good result?
Oh, well, you've got Queensland real estate agents on Facebook today saying the gap's narrowing between Sydney and Melbourne. Here we come. We beat, we state of origin all over again. That's a good result. That's a good result. There's no when we look at over the last few weeks and what's been happening, and it's a fair sample size. So that might be promising signs for people in that part of the world that own real estate or want to invest in real estate.
Tom Panos, it's always a great joy to have you on board, an auctioneer with loads of experience. Give us your sold to take us to the break.
Going once, twice, third and final call. Going. Sold to Charles Tarbey.
Checks in the mail. I love you.
Thank you, mate. See you next week, Charles.
Two very big lies.